Today's talk, first I just talk about the overview of the aging as a disease, and also the measuring aging, how to measure aging. And the third one is the aging study in Japan. So aging as a disease. So aging is a challenge for health and economy. And age-related disease cause reduced quality of life and higher health care costs and decreased productivity. Seeing aging as a disease can help prevent, diagnose, and treat these diseases. So this is a strategy for aging control. In these 3 years, that we usually think about the prevention, but now we can treat aging. That's the real rejuvenation, right? So the first of all, we have to measure the aging. I mean the biological age. That's the aging clocks. Also the epigenetic clock. And also for prevention, you will do exercise on the nutrition treatment or a mental treatment, or also we have to think about environment. And in the treatment, so now you know the rapamycin and metformin, and also the treat for the senescence cells. And also now you know the blood exchange or plasmapheresis. So now we have a lot of tools to treat aging. And also in this group, we will do the cosmetology levels. But now the David Sinclair group, Harvard, showed that the rejuvenation, real rejuvenation, we can reverse to young. That's a very important thing. We have to think about very seriously. Otherwise, we can live for a long time, long time. That's a very big problem for us. And then now there are several clinical trials for aging-related diseases. So for example, the NAD and the telomere treatment or epigenetic treatment, or also the nutrition sensitizing and mitochondria treatment, or also you do several things about treat the senolytics or xenomorphics. And now we also think about the stem cell, to treat the stem cell exhaustion. That's a real true rejuvenation. So now we have many treated tools. That's the level is now in the almost phase 1 to phase 2 in US or in EU or in Japan. So for clinical trial, we must measure the aging. And if now you want to do something directly, so now as far as I know, these two substances are effective probably. SGLT2 inhibitors and also metformin. So this is already FDA approved drugs. So you can do by yourselves. And for this reason, we have to measure aging. So the aging is a very complex process that cannot be easily captured by a single diagnostic tool. So first, just I will talk about how to measure aging, and also the biological aging. And the last, I will talk about the epigenetic clock. So to measure aging, chronological aging, and basically we know the chronological aging, but also we have to know about the biological age. First, physiological. Second, genetics. And the third is phenotypic. And the fourth is the physical activity. And the 5 is a blood test. Usually many people should be done. But also in number 6, we would like to say that the epigenetic clock, that's very important for us. And in the case of physiological measurement aging, basal metabolic rate or the heart rate, or even in the case of ECG or in the phenotypic case, you know well about the appearance. Appearance is very important to know the aging. And also in the case of blood test, probably you will measure the NAD or NAMT, or also the hormone, testosterone, or etc. And now we can measure epigenetic clock. It's a very important to measure aging. And in the case of biological age, we already know that telomere length, also that's a very famous one. And also in the case of G-tail, it's not a real aging measurement system, but also you can measure somehow your aging. And the second one, of course, we are talking about the methylations. And the third one is also PSA for men. PSA is not so bad to know your aging, right? And also in fourth, the RBC and plasma albumin, also very important to know about the aging. And also now we already know about a lot of amino acid analysis, but it's very expensive, right? And I just mentioned about epigenetic clock. Epigenetic clock's definition is epigenetic clock are age predictors that use machine learning models trained on DNA CpG methylation values to predict chronological or biological age. So there is some confusing, even in my case. One side you can measure your chronological numbers, and also you can measure the biological numbers. So in this clock, you consist of set of 4 to 400 CpG. That depends on the clock. And corresponding algorithm that use the maturation levels to predict age. So, and now the new one is we measure the speed of aging. So this is a chromatin modification. So you know this chromatin. And in DNA maturation is levels here. So in epigenetics, you already know that the DNA methylation or histone methylation or acetylation or microRNA. That's a very important to check or change the RNA expression. The right side, you can see that the chromosome. In the young case, you cannot see lots of maturation. The red one is methylation staining, and the right side is the old methylation staining in the chromosome. And also in this study shows that in young twins, you cannot see so many methylations. Also in the 50 years old twins, you can see many methylations. Red part, orange spot is the methylation site. And another thing is, it's just interesting for us. Even in the genetical twin, you can see some difference between the twins in old. So even in the 50 years old twins, you can see some difference between two chromosomes, I mean the two twins. So that means, so in young case, the methylation is not so different. But in old case, that depends on your environment, your lifestyle, you will get lots of methylation. And recently, the David Sinclair Harvard group mentioned that information theory of aging. That's a new one. The last month or so. Aging is due to loss of transcriptional networks and epigenetic information over time. That's very new idea, or at least if it is so, the genetic background is not so important. The real important thing is environment. I mean, a big definition environment. That means a lifestyle, or also our our environment. That's very important for us. The major point is probably stress or such areas. This is how to the epigenetic clock measure aging. First, DNA is extracted from many cells and it's chemically treated to reveal DNA methylation markers at CPG sites, islands. So in the DNA, for example, the number one CPG site, normally if you can say that for all, 100%. And the number two CPG site, it's only 2. And number 3 is 1. For example, number 4 site is the 3, and the number 5 is 0. So if you use the microRNA to detect DNA methylation markers and report the frequency of across all the cells in the sample. So that means the number 1 is all methylated, but number 5 all are negative. And then the DNA methylation profiles from people of all age and added to see aging-related patterns. So in the 20 to 40, the number 2 the CPG island site and number 3 CPG site are positive or high level, but compared to the even in the number 60 to 80s, there are no lots of number 1 CPG sites, but there are no number 2 or number 3 CPG sites maturation. So that means if you see these parts, some are low level of maturation, some are high level of maturation. You can measure such a things independent on ages. So, and then statistics model is computed to estimate human age using DNA methylation profiles. And if you make this such a software system, now you put your new sample to that system. So, number 1 CPG island is 100% maturation. And number 2 is, let's say, 50%. Number 3 site is only 25%. And number 4 is 75. And then you mix to that soft, you will get that you are 62 years old. That's the basic idea. And now at the beginning of the 2013, Horvath and Hannum, they made this system. Maybe Horvath will get the Nobel Prize, I think. And then this model train predicts the age of time series. This data, just if you put this Horvath system, you got the number of age. But this is not, the idea is very super. But in the real life, it is very hard to say okay, in the animal system, you can measure the animal's age. But in the generation 2, that's the integrated many phenotypic measurement of aging. In this case, the morbidity or mortality risk on the genetical or biological age measurement. It can, for example, in the case of smoking or many things is very bad for health or something like that. The most famous one is a pheno age and grim age. Also, they are using still. And also the telomere length clock is also involved in this area. But now the generation 3, the generation 3 is the phenotypic training data from prospective cohort was used to generate measures of biological aging rate. It's one kind of speed. So that's a very famous one, Dunedin pace. Dunedin study is a very famous one. And then almost 1973 or so, they started that measure all things, whole life. You can just ask them question or something like that. And also they measure lots of biological aging before talk about it. And then finally they use epigenetic clock. They made their own epigenetic clock. That is a very nice system. And then I will show you the later about these data. But now, still we have problem about in that epigenetic clock. In that epigenetic clock, we don't know the real mechanism. Just it's a statistical data. So we don't know the real data. So we cannot use this data for our patient or so. So now they want to know about the mechanism-dependent epigenetic clock. That's a new one. That next generation epigenetic clock. That's a Dunedin pace. So the Levine, the Horbus group's Levine, Dr. Levine wants to make the more statistical system, and then they found that the statistically 0.99 to 0.998, it's completely one line. It's a completely. And then also the ICC, that's the difference between the samples. It's a 0.97 to 0.99. So it's a completely same. So they made this system Dunedin pace. So also there are several new mechanical dependency epigenetic clock. For example, the PCR2 clock, that is a Polycom 2's area sum clock. And also the just Black Institute, Dr. Baden, of course you know the very famous person, that he recently mentioned about Intin clock. Intin clock is they use more naive T cell or the immunological systems. And then also David Sinclair will make time sec. It's probably, it will be very cheap, it will be. Within 4 or 5 years, he will publish or produce those systems. It's only under $10 he will show us such a data. So, but the point is, another point is the one thing. In the case of G3, Dunedin pace is the longitudinal study. From 1970 to 2023, still they are using this system. But other G1 and G2 is a cross-section study. So the almost 5 or 10 years, we only can do a cross-section study. And we usually say about okay, this data, this cross-section study is very important for us also. But now, at that time, many people say longitudinal study is a very low-level science. But now, converse, the longitudinal study must be done in aging study, right? So we have to think about a more longitudinal study. Otherwise, we cannot show the real data. Because if you birth 1970. So in this time, our environment is some special data. But even in the case of in 1947 or so, if you birth in 1970, 47 or so, that your environment is completely different from this 1970. So we must use the longitudinal study to measure aging. And then Rick Baden will did show us the Intin clock 2023. The very interesting thing is the cellular composition change with age. So there are so many problems about the efficacy of that epigenetic clock. For example, in the case of the naive CD8 T cells younger than effector memory CD8 T cells. So that means for treatment, if you take naive CD8 T cell, and then even in this naive CD8 T cell also will age. But you can use this cell to treat yourself, right? So that's a very important. This side is very important for, at least for me. And then the naive CDT cell epigenetic clocks also getting older. So if one idea is, I would like to keep this CD8 T cell at the beginning, I mean in young age, and then keep for let's say the 40 or 50 years in the liquid nitrogen, and you can inject it. So maybe we can keep our age for a long time. And then also the another things, we already know about the harm of aging. And then now, at the beginning, it's 9 numbers, but now we add to 5 others. And also, in my case, I would add other 2. But the important thing is that in the case of epigenetic clock, some are associated, some are not associated. In the case of genomic instabilities, there are no correlation between epigenetic clock. And also in the case of telomere reduction, that's a pity for me, but telomere reduction is also no correlation with epigenetic clock. And also the epigenetic change and nutrition sensing and mitochondrial function and stream exhaustion, that's very correlate with epigenetic clock. So the harmful of aging, in the harmful of aging, there are some different, completely different mechanisms about in epigenetic clock. Okay, also the recent in the paper about grim age and phen age, you can show the accelerated aging, the smoking, alcohol, weight circumstance, or the, BMI, CPR level. Also in the case of phen age, the body fat percentage, waist circumference, the BMI. The interesting thing is that the celebrated age. The interesting thing is education or higher household income. Also in the case of phenotype, also the education is a negative things. And then also the which epigenetic clock are practical. I already said that in the size of effector size, the Dunedin pace is higher than others. Also the grim is very high. And in the accuracy and reproductivities, means that ICC, it's also the Dunedin pace is number 1. And also the Dunedin POAM is a one years before system, and also the very useful. I mean, if you take your samples and then you divide the two samples and then check your system, so these 2 samples are different between in that system. So that's a very pity for us. So very high level ICC is very important. And also the very interesting thing is the occupation of these factors. I mean, in grim age, health behavior is a very high amount of the percentage. But in Dunedin pace, they will show that the health behavior, but also the depression or childhood environment. That's very interesting. And also, in this case, only Dunedin pace detects different age between calorie restriction, which recently they published as things, this part. So in the other epigenetic clock could not separate these data. And in my case, I started about the 21st with this system, and then at the beginning I used the Harvard's system. So it was 62, but they showed that 55. And the Dariden POM, it's a one kind of speed. One is the center. But if you get 1.04 over 1.0.4, 1.4, so that means you are getting older and older. And if you get 0.6, so you are not old. You are keeping young. And in my case, the 2022, the 1.01. So that means in that time I got weight a little bit. So it's that you can get the 1.01, but it's not so severe. So if you train by myself, maybe we will get the new data. So that's the new one. PCA system is the Dunedin pace most effective epigenetic clock. And also I have to say something about the Japan. So in Japan, recently some people established the centenarian and supercentenarian epigenetic age. So you can see that they are so young, almost 20% younger than normal. It's a completely different systems. So in Japan, in blue zone, Okinawa, the diet or also the stress reduction is very important. Also, they usually say about the sense of purpose. What is your life also? That's very important for them. And also, now we are trying to make some longitudinal study in Kyoto area, Yosa Sea. So also they have a green space or diet or community support. There are some combination in local social system. That's also very important for them. And then also the very important, interesting paper is available that environmental change in immigration contribute to DNA maturation. In that case, if you grow up in Bangladesh, so and then move to England. So in this case, they have a lot of stress or they have some special environment in those areas. And then probably you will get a high speed of DNA maturation epigenetic clock. Today's my talk is the overview of aging and disease and measuring aging. How to measure it? The most important thing is the epigenetic clock age predictor that use a machine learning models trained to DNA CpG maturation value. And also I just talk about the Okinawa and Kyoto case. And then my opinion is now we change it to chronological age to biological age. We must check biological age. And then I'm the director of the Japan Expo Osaka 2025. In Japan Expo, we established the Osaka Healthcare Pavilion. And then I would like to measure your age in that pavilion. When you come to that pavilion, please come here. And then also this year, the last year we did the AMWC Japan 2022. That's the first time. And now we moved to Kyoto. AMWC Japan will held in that Kyoto International Conference Center. Please join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, all of you. It's a pleasure for me to be here again this year and talking about a new topic: glucose, insulin, glucagon, GLP-1, fat. As you all know, aging is associated to a decrease in muscle mass and an increase in fat mass. And if you could prevent those to process, we would be acting in anti-aging. With metabolic impact, physical impact, and psychological impact. Several years ago, we proposed that effective anti-aging therapy would be physical exercise, but not any kind of physical exercise. Physical exercise able to improve physical fitness. And we tested this hypothesis recently by controlled trial in which volunteer from 45 to 60 years, I was one of those volunteers, was submitted to different kind of physical training, high intensity intensive training, high intensity intensive training coupled to whole body myostimulation as an additional overload, physical activity recommendation according to WHO, and a control group. And myself, it was done along 2 years, and myself, I was included in the control group and in this exercise group. And we show that, obviously, as we could expect, there was an improvement in physical fitness, with increasing VO2 max and increasing in strength. There was an improvement in body composition with a decrease in fat mass and an increase in lean mass and muscle mass, as could be also expected. But we also show that there was an increase in basal metabolic rate and in fat oxidation rates, both during exercise and in basal conditions. So even when you are not doing exercise any longer, you improve the oxidation of fat, and you prevent the accumulation of fat, even in basal condition, as I said. We also show that there was an improvement in steroid hormones with increase in testosterone levels in both in males and females, and a decrease in cortisol and an increase in DHEA. So healthier steroid hormones profile. We also show that there was an improvement, could serve this kind of intervention as a treatment for cardiometabolic risk. And in particular, we found that there was an improvement in insulin sensitivity. Sleep quality also improved, and more important, there was an increase in the plasma clotho protein, which is a marker not of aging, it's a marker of effectiveness of anti-aging. And this is a measure that you can do in radioimmunoassay, can be done in any laboratory. And the expression of this gene, which is shown as the increasing plasma circulating levels, was obtained, was accomplished with any kind of physical training intervention. S-clotoplasma level is associated to body composition, to other anti-aging biomarkers as hormone D, vitamin D, and also it is associated to basal metabolic rates and fuel oxidation. So this marker is an effective measurement of anti-aging. But how we gain fat in aging and how to prevent it in anti-aging? And the explanation is within this tangle, this glucose, insulin, glucagon, GLP-1, fat, muscle tangle. In aging, as you know, there is an increase in fat mass, there is a decrease in muscle mass, and there is also an increase in advanced glycation end products. which are related to the levels of blood glucose, as we will see. In anti-aging, we should prevent the increase or even decrease fat mass to increase or prevent the decrease in muscle mass, and also prevent or block the increase in aged products. How it could happen? As you all know, blood glucose is the result of an equilibrium between glucose disposal and hepatic glucose production. And the longest and the highest the blood glucose are elevated, the highest is the formation of aged products. Blood glucose is controlled, as you all know, not only by insulin, it's controlled by the insulin-glucagon molar ratio that control glucose production, glucose disposal, and they are in a kind of feedback loop, control one another. Blood glucose control insulin-glucagon molar ratio, and the insulin-glucagon molar ratio control blood glucose. And insulin and glucagon are controlled by themselves in the way that glucagon stimulates insulin secretion very rapidly. In 6 minutes, you have the highest secretion, and insulin inhibits glucagon secretion. But insulin and glucagon do not work alone. They work with collaborators. And these collaborators are IGF-1, other growth factors for insulin, and for glucagon is oxyntomodulin, glycantine, and GLP-1. And the highest the ratio, insulin-glucagon, the less autophagy you attain. And the lowest the ratio, the highest autophagy can be obtained. And autophagy is equal to anti-aging. Increase anti-autophagy is effective anti-aging therapy. But the insulin-glucagon ratio does not only control blood glucose, it also controls lipogenesis and lipolysis. Insulin blocks tissue lipase and then blocking fatty acid production, but glucagon increases this lipase. And insulin also activates lipoprotein lipase, liberating fatty acid that could go to the fat tissue or to the muscle tissue. If the muscle tissue is active, this fatty acid will be used to produce ATP. But if they are not active, they also accumulate triglycerides. And this kind of triglycerides provide an important insulin resistance and the release of inflammatory markers. Muscle becomes fat. And also this higher ratio, insulin-glucagon, also stimulate triglyceride synthesis by the liver that afterwards will be exported to as VLDL, very low density lipoprotein. That would be the subject of action of this lipoprotein lipase activated by high insulin levels. This ratio change very importantly in different metabolic situation. For instance, you see this ratio is almost 70 with large carbohydrate meals, even higher than with intravenous glucose, which is only 25, and with a small meal, you have 10 times lower ratio. By contrast, after an overnight fast, the ratio is only 2.3, with a low carbohydrate diet, even lower, and with starvation, almost zero. And but what happened? This is theory, but what happened in the different daily life situation? You can be in basal state, post-absorptive state, fasting, or postprandially or absorptive state. And in any of those situations, you can be active or inactive. You can be stressed or non-stressed, acute or chronic. You can be healthy or unhealthy. You can be aging or you can be anti-aging in any of those situations. In this talk, we will analyze what happened in the post-absorptive active state, in fasting, also active, in sedentariness conditions with stress, chronic stress specifically. We will see what happened in the absorptive anti-aging and in the absorptive state with an anti-aging intervention. So in the post-absorptive active states, I mean, if you get up in the morning and instead of having breakfast, you remain active, you will have, as you have seen before, a low insulin ratio with rather low blood glucose levels, which prevent age accumulation, and also an activation of lipase that liberates fatty acid that will be used by muscles that are active. If you are not only in the post-absorptive state, but if you are a step forward, you are fasting, and or you are physically active, and the more active you are, the better, you will have a lower molar ratio, an enhanced lipase activity at the fat tissue, more liberation of fatty acid, which are used by the muscles. Therefore, you will prevent muscle loss, and you will have lower formation of age products. What happened in the post-absorptive state? Same, but you have breakfast, you don't move, and in addition to that, you are stressed. In that condition, you have insulin resistance. Insulin resistance may be because your muscle have accumulated too much fat. Insulin resistance because fat tissue does not accept any more triglycerides and has to defend themselves by blocking the action of insulin. But this is overcome by enhanced insulin secretion. Insulin secretion that is not able to block sufficiently glucagon levels, so blood glucose production is increased. Blood glucose disposal is decreased, blood glucose production is increased. Blood glucose production that comes back to the liver enhanced, mediated by this insulin action, which is a different effect from that, and this triglyceride accumulation can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is also facilitated by the arrival of fatty acid, which are liberated by the muscles, and obviously age accumulation. In the absorptive state, only the absorptive state, that means when you are absorbing what you have eaten, there is blood glucose is the result mainly from blood glucose level are the result mainly from absorption and disposal. And this absorption of glucose, 50% occur as glucose, but the other 50% occurs as lactate. This lactate will be transformed by neoglucogenesis in the liver to glucose, and this glucose coming from the intestine can lead to triglyceride synthesis that can be exported, obviously, as VLDL. All these processes are also controlled by the insulin-glucagon molar ratio. Insulin, which is elevated because of the increasing blood glucose, blocks hepatic glucose production and facilitate glucose disposal by the muscles. But if the muscle, again, is not active, accumulate triglycerides, which comes from the absorption and in the forms of chylomicrons, and from those which are liberated by the fat tissue. Interestingly, in the absorptive state, there is also the secretion of a substance which is GLP-1. GLP-1 is an incretin. Incretin as GIP, and as you know, incretin is liberated by in this case, by the gut, in the case of GIP, by the stomach, once the glucose is sensed to arrive, and before the blood glucose effectively increase. So there is a preventive insulin secretion. Before the blood glucose increase, there is already a stimulation by these incretin factors. That means that a longer and higher blood glucose increase would be prevented by the fact that insulin has been secreted in advance. That is an interesting point in order to prevent higher level of blood glucose, which are maintained during a longer period, which would stimulate during a longer period the insulin secretion, and therefore increasing the insulin-glucagon molar ratio. And that, coupled to the effect of GLP inhibiting appetite, explain the effectiveness of GLP-1 as for the treatment of obesity. But let's talk, to end, of an effective anti-aging intervention. For instance, metformin. One of the effects of metformin is to block the conversion of lactate into glucose. This 50% of the ingested glucose, which has been transformed into lactate and then reconverted into glucose, is prevented by metformin. So less glucose is available as it is as glucose for triglyceride synthesis. So it prevents triglycerides output by the liver. Blood glucose levels are therefore lower, so less increase in insulin levels and the less production of age products, among others effects. If in addition the amount of meals is limited and the muscle remain activity, is a comprehensive anti-aging intervention. So in summary, to rejuvenate body composition and activate autophagy, what you can do is to decrease the insulin-glucagon molar ratio by fasting, eating small, low-carbohydrate meals, in Spain, tapas. I invite you to come to eat tapas in Spain. You invited to Japan, I invite you to eat tapas. And being active. Instead of eating the tapas sitting, eating the tapas standing. I always have breakfast standing, I eat standing, I have dinner standing, every day of my life, except when I go to restaurant. And when you are used, it's perfectly fine. In Spain, we have the habit to do that, you know?
Great.
To eat standing. Okay, so, and eventually add a little bit of metformin. And if you do not rejuvenate with that, at least you will save money. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello. Thank you for your inspiring talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
How many hours is best to fast, in your opinion, after 13, after 14 hours, after 16 hours to bring up the autophagy, as you said? And what is the best way to break the fast after, let's say, 16 hours in order not to spike the glucose and the insulin levels? You said tapas, but I'm from Greece.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, small portions, you know. Okay. Anyway, the answer is very simple. Is for what our physiology has been designed along millions of years. We have not been physiologically designed to eat 3, 4, 5, 6 times per day. Our ancestors, hunter and gatherers, probably ate once per day, because the effort finding food was dangerous and very important. So probably 2 could be right. I know that maybe you would disagree, but we are designed for that. So probably my point is not eating after probably 5 in the afternoon, and then have some kind of breakfast, and then around 3, 4, 5 in the afternoon have main meals. Physiologically, that is quite logical. Maybe I know that they are nutritionists that wouldn't agree with that, but I am a nutritionist too, but I am an endocrinologist, but mainly I am a physiologist.
So thank you.
So I expect your question, you know.
So the open window, sir.
Sorry.
So the open window is, let's say, from 2 to 5.
So to instead of 8 hours of fasting or something like that, 12 or 13. And I do not think that you are going to speak about the pancreas of stress. So.
Okay, sure, have another idea? Or?
It was fantastic slides and so didactic, and thank you so much. This was great. Just 2 quick questions. One, as you mentioned, GLP-1 and its capacity through its play to inhibit the feeling of hunger. What about the interplay between adiponectin and leptin in your complex system?
Yeah.
Because when they are genetically undermined, people have a real problem just because they are leptin deficient or something like that. Second very quick question, metformin. Last year came out a real scary article about testosterone receptor inhibition by metformin. So you can't really give metformin to a 30, 40-year-old man, although he might be in difficulty on the points you have raised. So just 2 quick questions.
Yeah, the issue of leptin is very important. Leptin is expressed by adipose tissue in order to preserve the homeostasis. Adiponectin is not the opposite of leptin. It has another actions, but in addition to that, as you obviously know, there is a leptin resistance. Yes, a leptin resistance which is very determinant. And leptin does not only prevent hunger, it also makes you more active. If you have a leptin resistance, your aim is to remain inactive in order to recover the fat mass that you have lost. So this is something that should be attained not in a very few space of time. It should be attained slowly, and provided there is no stress. Because if you are stressed, the organism interprets that this is the situation that could be expected. You are stressed, you will not eat, you have to save, and you become a thrifty phenotype. A thrifty phenotype that anything you eat, even a small portion, even a tapa, would be saved. Saved as fat. And the second question was metformin, yeah. And again, my experience as anti-aging, in personal experience, because I take also metformin. I do not take metformin as a diabetic. I do not take metformin because I have to control blood glucose. And the good news is that metformin does not decrease blood glucose. Metformin prevents the blood glucose increase. It's completely different. It's
the question was about
it was about testosterone. But if you have systematically, let's put it simple, enhance autophagy, you will have a decrease in testosterone.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Let's put it simple. But if one day you have a blocking autophagy, let's say you don't eat, you exercise a lot, but the other day you eat and you do not move, the organism interprets that the situation is optimal for reproduction. So it is the same which happens with metformin. The point is not to treat your patients with metformin every day of the week at the same time with the same dose. Is to trick the body.
Great.
Some
Great.
days you treat, for instance, myself, whenever I travel, and I travel a lot, I don't bring my metformin with me. On the weekend, I don't have metformin. If one day I don't eat, I usually eat little, but if I eat less than little, I don't take metformin. You know what I mean? It's necessary to trick.
But this is the whole thing.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
great. That's very interesting. Thank
Yeah.
you. So now we have to close this session. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Today's talk, first I just talk about the overview of the aging as a disease, and also the measuring aging, how to measure aging. And the third one is the aging study in Japan. So aging as a disease. So aging is a challenge for health and economy. And age-related disease cause reduced quality of life and higher health care costs and decreased productivity. Seeing aging as a disease can help prevent, diagnose, and treat these diseases. So this is a strategy for aging control. In these 3 years, that we usually think about the prevention, but now we can treat aging. That's the real rejuvenation, right? So the first of all, we have to measure the aging. I mean the biological age. That's the aging clocks. Also the epigenetic clock. And also for prevention, you will do exercise on the nutrition treatment or a mental treatment, or also we have to think about environment. And in the treatment, So now you know the rapamycin and metformin, and also the treat for the senescence cells. And also now you know the blood exchange or plasmapheresis. So now we have a lot of tools to treat aging. And also in this group, we will do the cosmetology levels. But now the David Sinclair group, Harvard, showed that the rejuvenation, real rejuvenation, we can reverse to young. That's a very important thing. We have to think about very seriously. Otherwise, we can live for a long time, long time. That's a very big problem for us. And then now there are several clinical trials for aging-related diseases. So for example, the NAD and the telomere treatment or epidemic treatment or also the nutrition sensitizing and mitochondria treatment, or also you do several things about treat the senolytics or xenomorphics. And now we also think about the stem cell, to treat the stem cell exhaustion. That's a real, true rejuvenation. So now we have many treated tools. That the level is now in the almost phase 1 to phase 2 in US or in EU or in Japan. So for clinical trial, we must measure the aging. And if now you want to do something directly, so now as far as I know, these two substances are effective probably. SGLT2 inhibitors and also metformin. So this is already FDA approved drugs. So you can do by yourselves. And for this reason, we have to measure aging. So the aging is a very complex process that cannot be easily captured by a single diagnostic tool. So first, just I will talk about how to measure aging, and also the biological aging. And the last, I will talk about the epigenetic clock. So to measure aging, chronological aging, and basically we know the chronological aging, but also